Today's video is sponsored by Warby Parker. Warby Parker is committed to providing exceptional vision care online and in stores, offering eyeglasses, sunglasses, eye exams, and contact lenses. Glasses start at just $95, including prescription lenses. But here is what the best part is, at least I think so. Warby Parker also offers a free home try-on program. You get to order 5 pairs of glasses to try on in the comfort of your own home, and you get to do that for free. For 5 days, no obligation to buy, you get to try them all on at home. And they even ship them to you for free and include a prepaid shipping label to return them back. And this was absolutely perfect for me because I rarely have time to leave my house. So being able to go somewhere and have the luxury of just like relaxing and trying on new frames literally does not exist for me. So this was an absolute game changer because my eyeballs are needing a little tune-up here. This is the box it comes in, which it's just obviously presentation is everything, right? So it comes in this amazing little box, and then here you have all of the instructions of what to do when you try them on and what to do if you don't like them or if you want to keep frames. Then it gives you all of the frames you ordered. Also, all of the frames do come individually packaged and sealed, but for the sake of ease, so that you're not here with me for 20 minutes, I already took them out of their bag. Okay, first step, we have the Hector Wide in Driftwood. Okay, what do you guys think? These aren't the ones, right? No. These aren't the ones. I'm not feeling it. Okay, next we have the Haley Medium in Russet Red. What do you guys think? Feeling very like librarian. What do you think? Do we like the red? How are we looking? Okay, next are the Nadia Tortoise, but I'm already thinking that these are gonna be too small because I have like a very big head, not metaphorically, like physically a very large head, and I feel like these are gonna be too small. I feel like this isn't it. This isn't the vibe. Do I look like a doll? I don't know. These feel really weird on my face. Ooh, these are nice. Let's try the Percy in Matte Jet Black. I feel very, very studious. But do I look like a hipster? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. What do you guys think? Okay, last but not least, we have the Winston Medium in Jet Black. I like these. I think I'm gonna like these. Wow, they feel really sturdy. I like these. I can't see myself, guys, so you have to tell me what you think. Look, they don't shake off my head. I can wave my red flag around and they don't come off. I like these. How do they look if my hair's up? Down? I don't know, guys. You gotta be my judge here. I think we found a winner. So what are you waiting for, guys? Try 5 pairs of glasses at home for free at warbyparker.com/10tolife. And if you're one of those people who's like, but Annie, I have 20/20 vision. I'm perfect. I don't need glasses. Get yourself some blue light glasses because they are non-prescription and a game changer if you spend a lot of time on the computer, which I know you do because you are here with me right now and always. Warby Parker's blue light filtering lenses are now available, and they filter more blue light than their standard polycarbonate or high index lenses. So they are protecting those eyeballs of yours. Thank you, Warby Parker, for sponsoring today's video. And everyone, hit that link, go to warbyparker.com/10tolife and check them out for yourself. And don't forget, let me know which of these frames you like best for me. All right, guys, let's get into today's case. Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Elise, and this is 10 to Life, where we talk everything true crime. So if you are brand new and you've never checked us out before, welcome. I hope you enjoy today's case coverage and video. And if you like it and you want to check this channel out some more and support it, hit that subscribe button below. And for all of my returning 10 to Lifers, welcome back. So happy to have you guys here today. And if you are listening to the podcast version of this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, welcome all of the new listeners as well. And as always, if you are listening to the podcast, but you want a little bit more action and you want to check out the video version of this case, where you can see me waving my red flags and you can see actual footage of the case and crime scene photos that I'm showing on the screen as I talk, head over to YouTube, 10 to Life, and check us out over there. Okay, guys, so the case we're talking about today is one that kind of is reminiscent of the Drew Peterson case. And for those of you who are familiar with the case, you may know where I'm going, but it's kind of like a hybrid of that. Also Scott Peterson a little bit. I don't even dare want to say the W word, Watts, but a little bit of Chris Watts in there. It's one of those cases. So I want you all to buckle up and get ready because we are going down the rabbit hole today. Stacy Feldman is a 44-year-old woman with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Her hair was feathered and looked very similar to Farrah Fawcett. She also had a very large smile that was infectious. Stacy was a wife and a mom of 2 kids named Sydney and Charlie. She worked for a company called Partners Seeking a Cure, which was a nonprofit dedicated towards awareness, research, support, and curing those with a very rare liver disease. And many, many years ago, Stacy found love with a man named Robert, who was a meat wholesaler and had brown hair. It was a little bit longer, kind of disheveled and scruffy, and big, thick brown eyebrows. The 2 of them married back in 2005 and had a beautiful home in Denver, Colorado. For those of you who are not familiar with Denver, it is a huge, huge mega city. Denver's population is over 700,000. So from the outside, the Feldmans were a sweet family who literally had it all. However, on the afternoon of March 1st, 2015, all of that changed when Robert called the police shortly after 3 p.m. saying he found Stacy lying unresponsive in the bathtub and with the shower running cold water. But what happened to Stacy? Did she just fall and did she injure herself? Or was this a cover-up by somebody else? So guys, let's jump right in.
Tend to Life with Elise starts right now.
It was March 1st, 2015. Robert Feldman called 911, saying he'd found his wife in the bathtub unresponsive. Stacy Feldman, a mother of 2 and a prominent member of Denver's Jewish community, was dead. The circumstances shrouded in mystery.
When police and paramedics got to the home, they noticed that Stacy was laying on the master bedroom floor and she was completely naked. The only covering she had was a towel that was over her private areas. And Robert, her husband, said that he had been performing CPR on her. So of course, she was immediately transferred to a local hospital where, unfortunately, shortly after, she was pronounced as dead. Law enforcement was obviously trying to gather as much information about this as possible. A young, healthy woman doesn't just drop dead in the shower. So when they got to the house, Robert, or Bob as he liked to be called, was acting super confused and disoriented. And all of the medics were actually suspicious as he was acting. And in their words, they said he was being very overly dramatic, that he was hysterically screaming and wailing, and at some points getting so close to Stacy that they had to actually have the police physically get him out of the room so that they could work on her and try to save her life. He also was purposely avoiding questions and refusing to answer anything. So when the lead investigator was talking to him and asked if Stacy was lying face up or face down, he noted that he wasn't even sure. And when he said that, he then walked away from the conversation, which strikes me as odd. And I'm gonna, you know what? Here's what I'm gonna do, guys. And sorry for all you podcast listeners. I'm gonna raise my first red flag because I get it that you may be grief-stricken and you're in panic and shock. But if they're asking a simple question such as, was she face up or face down? Certainly you would know when you first laid eyes on her, what her facial expression was, if she was breathing, if she was face down, to turn her over to see what it was. So the fact that he says he wasn't sure and then just walked away from the conversation, to me, seems a little bizarre. But I'm also kind of jaded, so tell me what you guys think. He also apparently made sure to tell the investigator that he did not think that he wanted an autopsy performed on Stacy, which is such an odd thing to say, given that his spouse was now dead and he was maintaining that he had no clue how she died and how this could have happened. Wouldn't anybody want to know exactly what happened and how this happened? Nonetheless, investigators decided that this simply was way too weird, and they did order an autopsy, and they required that an autopsy be completed. Fast forward a little bit to May, and Bob randomly calls the investigators. When the investigators asked Bob where he had been on the day of Stacy's death and what he had done the previous day, trying to establish a timeline of sorts, he was more than forthcoming with his version of events from that day. So Bob told investigators that the night before Stacy's death, they had gone to a party together. He said that Stacy had actually taken edibles and that she said she was going to go and smoke some marijuana when they got home. However, that he wasn't sure if she ended up smoking or not. And the next morning was the day of the temple carnival. So the Feldmans were Jewish and were very, very active in their local temple. And it was the first day of Jewish school at the temple Sinai, and I hope I am saying that right. There was an opening service as well as a carnival happening that day as a celebration. So Bob told investigators that when he got up that morning, Stacy was extremely tired and she decided to stay home while he took the kids to the carnival. So she was sleeping apparently when he left the house, and then they had talked again around 8:30 a.m. And according to him, he took the kids and went to the synagogue for that opening service. And he said he left the synagogue at around 9:30 to 10 a.m. and then came home around noon. And he says that he went to the laundry room to change his clothes. He said he then called out for Stacy but didn't hear her and didn't hear any water running. But if he left the synagogue between 9:30 and 10 and he came home at noon, where was he from 9:30 or 10 a.m. to noon? Because the synagogue was less than 2 miles from the house, and it was under a 5-minute drive. He also noted in this conversation that he cleaned the garage after a shelf had randomly fallen. Seems like quite a hectic and coincidental day, if you ask me. But what Bob did not know at the time was that there was a full-scale investigation with information coming out behind the scenes, and his actions were actually leading investigators much closer to real answers. On March 2nd, the autopsy was done. There were many injuries on Stacy's body, but because there were no internal injuries, more testing had to be done to find out what her cause of death was. The doctor labeled it as undetermined, but did note that she had multiple hemorrhages and abrasions, and she also noted that Stacy had a cardiovascular disease. For whatever reason, after the autopsy, Bob called Stacy's sister and told her that Stacy's death had been ruled an accident, and that his doctor had said that she actually slipped on hair conditioner, fell, and then drowned. But I mean, first of all, seriously, common sense would tell him that people are going to absolutely follow up on what you're telling them. They are going to follow up on this cause of death. And if somebody is ordering more testing, that doesn't mean it's accidental. It would have already been ruled accidental. So obviously, Stacy's sister followed up with the investigator to let him know about that phone call that had just taken place with Bob and what he was saying. She also told investigators that Bob had told other family members that he had actually gone home that day at noon to walk the dog, something that he previously did not mention to the investigators. But perhaps the biggest news of all was that the kids were actually not picked up from the synagogue school on time, and the school had actually been calling Bob, wondering where he was during that pickup window. So right now, we have got immediate red flags. Just 3 weeks after Stacy's death, the detective on the case received a very, very strange letter. This letter was anonymous, and the letter essentially gave an entire list full of inconsistencies in the details of Stacy's death. This person was obviously very wary of Bob and didn't feel like things were aligning and matching up. The letter also discussed the kids not being picked up at the temple, which matched up with the story of Stacy's sister, saying that they were actually calling Bob trying to ask and inquire where he was for pickup. The letter also disclosed that Stacy had been texting with a friend the morning of her death with plans to meet that friend at noon at the temple, and she obviously never made it there. On May 4th, it was officially determined by the doctor that Stacy's death was determined to have an unknown cause. But even more shocking, her toxicology showed there was absolutely no marijuana in her system. So Bob's story of her taking edibles and then possibly smoking even more after that was total crap. If she would have, it absolutely would have shown up on her toxicology report. It was just one more inconsistency that they were able to add into this timeline. And just when the case couldn't get any more weird and confusing, a complete bombshell was dropped. But not a bombshell to those of you who are true crimers like me, because we always know that this is probably coming. So a tip was called into Crime Stoppers on June 11th, and this caller was a woman who claimed to have met Bob on an online dating site. Her name was Susan McBride, and they apparently met on Tinder, the dating app where you swipe right if you like them, swipe left if you don't. I think that's the way it goes, at least. So she releases this bombshell that she met good old Bob on Tinder. So detectives met with her the next day, and she disclosed that the two of them had met on Tinder and had gotten together. Apparently their discussions started on Tinder and then later moved to emails and then eventually to phone calls. Emails, guys, another red flag. So he eventually gave Susan his work phone number and told her that it would forward to his cell phone, but he never actually gave her his cell phone number. A little sketchy. He also wouldn't tell her his last name, but eventually he did tell her that his last name was Wolf, which was a fake last name. Obviously, it was Feldman. So the two of them had met for coffee around February 23rd, which was just 6 days before Stacy's death. Guys, I'm getting the red flag right now. They met 6 days before Stacy died. Then a couple of days later, they met again for dinner and they had sex. But during that first meeting, Bob apparently had told Susan that he was a divorced man. Now, obviously, when you meet somebody online, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say it at least, 9 times out of 10, you go right to Google. You want to know all about them. You tell your friends to sleuth them. You find them on social media. You're liking the aunts, neighbors, dogs, Instagram posts from 2001. You go to social media. So Susan went to social media and went online. And she also was kind of a little suspicious of him and wondering if he truly was divorced. So she decided to look into it. And when she did, she figured out his real last name. She also found out what his address was, and she learned about Stacy and the fact that the two of them shared this address. But when the woman asked Bob about it, he had an explanation for her, because of course he did. He told her that he and Stacy could not afford 2 houses, so that they alternated who stayed at the home for the kids' sake. Okay, a reasonable enough explanation, I suppose, but still, I don't know. That would throw off the red flags and the alarms to me. So then she says that she didn't hear from him for a bit, but that the two did have dinner and had sex at her house on March 26th, which was just 3 weeks after Stacy's death. They apparently made weekend plans after that, but then Bob began blowing her off and said that they couldn't meet, which was weird. It was like he was pulling away. Then after she tells the investigators all of this and lays everything out for them, she dropped a huge piece of information right into the detectives' laps. On the morning of March 1st, the exact day of Stacy's death, Susan had found Stacy's email address and emailed her asking if they were in fact divorced. And Stacy responded, and she said that they were not divorced and they were very much married. Susan apparently sent Stacy photos of email exchanges between her and Bob and also gave Stacy her telephone number. And Stacy called her at 8:52 a.m. and the two of them chatted on the phone for quite some time. Susan told Stacy all that had transpired between she and Bob, and Stacy told Susan that this was not the first time that Bob had cheated, and she told her too that now she was completely done with him, her exact words. That was the same day that Stacy died. So was this a coincidence, a huge twist of fate coincidence, or could this have been purposeful? Stacy's sister called the detective in mid-June discussing a large life insurance settlement that apparently Bob had discussed waiting on. Now, no one else in the family had any knowledge whatsoever about any sort of life insurance policy. So detectives followed up with the insurance company on July 15th and confirmed that back in 2010, a life insurance policy was taken out on Stacy for the amount of $750,000. All right, guys, we've got an affair. We've got life insurance. We've got an affair that he has now been caught. How many red flags do we need to start looking in good old Bobby Boy's direction here, right? So Robert had filed the claim, and the insurance had actually already paid him out just the month prior, just 2 months after Stacy had died. And the same day that the life insurance policy was confirmed, even more information came to light about the children not being picked up at the school that day. So the Jewish temple always held school from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Sundays. And the children had been going there for a while, and it was a known practice by the temple that if they were not picked up by 12:15, calls were made to the parents. Absolutely standard practice. So the two kids hadn't been picked up, so daughter Sydney called Bob with permission from the school director. And when Sydney got off the phone with her dad, she told the director that her dad was on his way and would be there shortly, and that they were then going to go to the carnival. Well, by 12:30, Bob hadn't arrived yet to pick them up. And remember, he said he was back home by noon. So given that they lived 5 minutes away, this was very strange. And because he didn't arrive and told his kids he was going to be there, the children started to get very frazzled. So the director took the kids to the carnival and got them food to distract them. Then somewhere between 12:35 and 12:40, she called 3 numbers that the school had on file: Bob's cell phone, Stacy's cell phone, and the home landline. But there was no response on any of the phones, so she left messages. She decided to call Bob one last time at 12:50, and this time she got an answer. And Bob said that he thought that the kids were being picked up by a family friend, supposedly that same friend that Stacy had made plans to meet up with at the carnival. Now that was obviously not the case, and Bob showed up at the temple at 1:05 to collect his children. This was a very cold day too in Colorado, yet Bob showed up wearing shorts, sneakers, and a sweatshirt. He was also very disheveled and not his usual talkative self, but he did say that he had just come home from the gym. But remember, initially he told family friends that he took the dog on a walk around noon. Originally he told the investigators that he was home and went in the laundry room about noon. So it's just another inconsistency in his recollection of events from that day. Bob took the kids to the carnival and played with them for about an hour. Before leaving, he thanked the director for keeping the kids late and for understanding the unusual circumstances, which was honestly that was the least he could have done. Your kids were frantic, she's taking care of them, trying to distract them. Yes, 100% deserves a thank you. A few days later, on August 10th, 2015, detectives were able to follow up with Stacy's friend, who Bob said was supposed to pick up the kids, and that same friend that Stacy had planned to meet up with that day. So this friend confirmed that they did have plans to meet, and that they were going to meet up at noon. When she picked up her own kids, she told the Feldman kids that their mom was coming and that they'd meet them at the carnival. They only stayed for about 45 minutes at the carnival, but she says she texted Stacy around 1 o'clock because she was a little concerned about her being a no-show. But she obviously never got a response back from Stacy. Now, due to the suspicious circumstances, the 911 phone calls were pulled and listened to by many investigators. All investigators agreed that there was for sure the sound of a toilet flushing in the call in the background and possible sounds of things being dropped, though they couldn't confirm that part 100%. The head detective is trained in the analysis of 911 calls, and he says that Bob had said some things that may be considered guilty indicators during that 911 call he made. Apparently, during the call, he was told to give CPR to Stacy, and he said that he was doing so, but investigators say they did not hear anything on the call indicating he was doing such. We've also seen this in cases before, guys. You know they're going to pull tape. They're going to roll tape on 911 calls. So if somebody is instructing you to do something, whether it's to walk somewhere to grab something, to do CPR, to call their name, even if you know that that person's dead because you killed them, do it anyway, so it sounds like you're doing it. I swear, these people are just idiots. 2 detectives went to the Feldman's house on June 24th, 2016, to try and do another interview with Bob. It had now been over a year since Stacy's death, and all of these inconsistencies were not adding up, yet they weren't directly pointing to anybody's guilt either. So when they got there, they noticed that there was a FedEx driver walking up the driveway with a very large box. They couldn't see the front door because the FedEx truck position was actually blocking their view, but then after the delivery driver left, they noticed that the box was not on the porch and had obviously been taken inside. So they approached the house and they knocked on the door and they rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. So whoever was inside was clearly trying to avoid them. And as soon as they got back to their office, the medical examiner's office called, saying that Bob had just called them and was asking if there were any changes to the autopsy report. A clear sign of guilt, and again, just a stupid move. Didn't time this out very well. Over a year has passed since your wife died. Now, this day, when detectives are knocking on your door and you're not answering, you're going to decide to call the ME's office to say, hey, have there been any changes to the autopsy report? Because he's trying to figure out if it's now been ruled as a homicide, and if that's why the detectives were coming to his door, because he wanted to probably, in my opinion at least, get the jump on them and then flee if that were the case. That's what I'm thinking. He basically wanted to suss out what they knew and what information had shifted. On October 24th, 2017, the lead detective met with an expert named Dr. Smock, and this doctor works solely with DV strangulations and suffocation cases. He is a world-renowned doctor who has worked on significantly high-profile cases. And he did a report on Stacy, and he came to the preliminary conclusion that Stacy had died as a result of suffocation or strangulation, and that the manner of death was in fact homicide. Dr. Smock did a full examination on the autopsy and other evidence in the case, and on December 22nd, 2017, he released his final conclusion. Stacy had died of asphyxia and or suffocation. Her injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma, strangulation, and suffocation. She had multiple hemorrhages, and her face had multiple blunt force trauma marks as well. And in his professional opinion, it was that she had been straddled and had injuries consistent with knee pressure being applied to her upper extremities. But the big problem with this was that Dr. Smock was not licensed to sign off on a cause of death in the state of Colorado. And you would wonder how that's possible, especially if they are world-renowned, but he could not sign off on this. Then on February 13th, 2018, almost 3 years after Stacy died, Bob was finally arrested for her murder. He was charged with first-degree murder, and he bonded out on a $1 million bond in July of 2018, and he was ordered with that to do home confinement. But Bob didn't want to follow home confinement, and as usual, he figured that he was above the law and that he could get away with something. So he had his doctor attest to his need for 1-hour walks and exercise for his health. And because it was doctor recommended, the request was granted. He was allowed to go for these 1-hour walks every day. But he was seen on multiple occasions riding his bike around town and around other towns too. He was stopping at coffee shops, at restaurants, and at stores. He was absolutely abusing his privilege of exercise. In 2019, a probate court case ensued in regards to the life insurance money that Bob had collected. Bob had given his attorney $550,000 to represent him, but that money came directly from Stacy's life insurance policy. So Stacy's family obviously didn't agree with this and believed that that money should go to the children, not to Bob's defense. So they sued. And when the lawsuit was filed, the probate court did side with Stacy's family. So the money was drying up, and Bob's attorney withdrew himself from the murder case, and then Bob was given a public defender. But Bob wasn't done yet, and he wasn't going to take this sitting down. So he took that decision to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court sided with him, saying that because the money had already been given to a third party, also known as his attorney, the law firm, they couldn't freeze the money anymore. Essentially, in the eyes of the law, Stacy's family acted too late. Just a complete injustice and such a loophole. In 2020, Bob began renting out his pool for pool parties in an effort to make some extra cash. And this is a real thing. I actually discovered this a few months ago, that if you're a homeowner and you have a pool, you can rent the pool out, almost like Airbnb, but for pool parties. So he started doing this to make a little bit of extra cash. But in July of 2020, while awaiting trial, a zoning inspector visited this home. And when doing so, he saw adults dropping children off for a pool party, which you legally can't rent out your home pool for commercial use in Colorado. So Bob was issued a notice and told that he'd be fined $150 per day if he didn't stop.
A man accused of killing his wife is now in trouble for pool parties. Robert Feldman is facing murder charges in the death of his wife, Stacy, in 2015. He's currently out on bond and accused of renting out his pool. Denver's Community Planning and Development Department says it issued a notice to stop renting it out commercially. The home isn't zoned for that, and it's a violation to rent out a personal pool for commercial use. The city says a zoning inspector visited the home on South Potomac this morning and saw people dropping kids off for a pool party. The department will check back in 10 days to make sure he is following the orders. If he is, the city says there won't be a punishment. As for the murder trial related to the death of his wife, Stacy, it is scheduled to start in September. Feldman says he found his wife unresponsive in a bathtub back in 2015. Her death was originally classified as undetermined, but an expert later testified there was evidence she'd been strangled.
In June 2021, there was a hearing in regards to employment for Bob. He now wanted to get a job to earn money because the pool wasn't working anymore. The prosecution argued that he didn't need to work since he was still living off of Stacy's life insurance policy. Ultimately, the judge denied the job request, not because of the life insurance money, but because of Bob's previous behavior with not following home confinement rules or any rules for that matter. Bob also had relationships while he was on home confinement, and one person from these relationships actually has come out saying that he SA'd her.
He contacted me through JDate.
He seemed genuine.
Stephanie Shoemaker
He was very charming.
and Tracy Fagan
He seemed really nice. He was interested in me as a person.
don't know each other, but they say they each went on one date with Robert Feldman, completely unaware of what had happened to his wife, Stacy.
There was a pool in his community, is what he had said, and then we were going to go to dinner.
It sounded like an innocuous first date to Stephanie, who met Feldman in a grief counseling class after his wife's death. After arriving,
I found out the pool is in his backyard. So almost instantly I felt like there was something off when I got there, but I thought maybe I was just overreacting.
As time passed, she says there was talk about how secluded the pool was. And then she says he led her upstairs. That's where she alleges Robert Feldman assaulted her.
At that point, I just was in survival mode. It was like I wasn't even there. It was happening, but I wasn't in my body when all that was happening. Just had to do what I needed to get out.
A few weeks later, she reported the incident to the police. No charges were filed.
It was a very typical get-to-know-you first date. We took a walk with my 2 dogs for about an hour.
It was early 2019 in a park just around the corner from Feldman's home. She knew him as Bob, knew he was widowed. After that first date, they stayed in touch. She says Feldman pressed her for a second date, and she suggested meeting for a drink.
He kept referring to coming over his house and making me dinner, and that's not really what I consider appropriate for a second date.
So she asked, why can't we just meet for a cocktail?
And he said, well, I have some legal troubles, and I'm not allowed to leave the house.
Legal troubles? She typed Robert, Denver, house arrest into a Google search.
The 9 News article and lots of other articles came up. Couldn't believe it.
She cut off all contact.
I wish I would have went with my gut instinct and left when I knew something was not right.
It is scary.
I really don't want any other woman to be in that situation.
Finally, the trial started at the beginning of April this year. It took 7 years for this trial to happen. During the trial, Bob's attorneys argued that the cause of death is still labeled as undetermined, meaning that they cannot medically pinpoint what happened to this person, because remember, that expert doctor couldn't sign off on it. They argued that Stacy could have died from her underlying conditions that she was diagnosed with. And another key argument was that Dr. Smock had never completed an autopsy, and his experience had mostly been done on living people. However, the prosecution fought back even harder. When bringing Dr. Smock on the stand, he testified that he based his opinion on more than 80 injuries to Stacy's body, plus hemorrhaging in the victim's eyes and blood that had pooled above her neck. One of the big points discussed was also the fact that Stacy was still wearing her watch. He testified that most people do not keep their watches on in the shower, which is actually a very good and critical point to bring up here. The watch and some impressions on Stacy's body gave him the impression that she was strangled with her clothes on. But he also said that the bruising on her body led him to believe that Bob might have placed his knees on her body and on her arms to hold her down, and that he could have rendered her unconscious in as little as 5 to 10 seconds, and that she would have stopped breathing 1 to 2.5 minutes after that. The prosecution dropped a new detail too, that Bob had called the ME's office back on March 2nd, the day after this now alleged murder, and specifically asked them not to perform an autopsy. Now, we all know innocent people don't just go out of their way and ask for no autopsy for no reason, especially on their loved ones. The prosecution also argued that Stacy's autopsy was the first autopsy that this doctor had ever performed, and they argued that could have been the reason it was listed as an undetermined death. Bob's mistress, Susan McBride, also testified, and she testified in court and provided more details than she previously had. In some of her first messages to Bob, she said, "Guess who? Just a little leg to tease you, LOL," with a picture of fuzzy slippers and her ankle. Old people do not know how to flirt. No offense, guys. You don't know how to flirt. Bob responded with, "So are those your legs? Can I see more?" Susan then said, "Just how risque do you think I am? I need to meet you first. Toes would be a good next step." I mean, guys, it's like cringe reading this. To which Bob then replied, "I agree, we should meet. When can I see your toes?" Literally the weirdest message thread ever, and just like gives me secondhand embarrassment. It really, really does. So she also discussed the issues with Bob giving her fake names. He used Mike Reed and Robert Wolf. And at one point, Susan tried to end things because of the fake names and not being able to find anything out online about Bob. But somehow Bob convinced her to give him a second chance, saying that he previously had a stalker, and that's why he used these fake names. I mean, obviously this guy is some type of like good, smooth talker with how much Susan went along with these antics. Or maybe Susan's just, a hopeless romantic. I don't know. Susan said that she went to the police after searching Stacy's name again and then finding the obituary. Her testimony was key in this trial. Another key point in the trial was the repeated infidelities. Bob was no stranger to cheating, and the couple had actually separated in the past and taken many breaks due to him cheating on her. The Feldmans' now teenage daughter, Sydney, was also brought on the stand at the trial, and she discussed that morning. She discussed that morning being a typical morning. She said her mom seemed happy and that the family all had breakfast together. Then after her dad picked them up from school, she said they stopped by the bicycle shop. When they got home, he told her to go back downstairs and put away her coat. She says while doing so, she heard her dad start screaming from the balcony and yell at them to go to the neighbors. Stacy's last text message was at 9:59 a.m. So prosecutors argued that she was killed somewhere between 9:59 and noon. And that time frame would make sense given that Bob didn't pick up the kids until after 1. He had enough time to do the crime and then to handle the cleanup. But if they all woke up happy that morning and were all having breakfast together, I don't know if this was planned. I think that perhaps this happened because Stacy found out about the affair. Bob wasn't expecting Susan to reach out to Stacy. He wasn't expecting him to get caught up in all of this. So I think that he got caught up in all of it. So I think they started that morning happy, and the day was a typical morning as usual, and then everything shifted because his whole lie blew up. On April 19th, after only 2 hours of deliberations, the jury came back with a guilty verdict, and the judge immediately issued a life sentence without the possibility of parole. After 7 long years, justice was finally served, and Stacy's family was extremely relieved.
We've had so many delays that every time we thought we were going to get close, we would get our hopes up and think that it was going to come to an end, and then we would be crushed again.
On this day, after that one last delay, there was relief and memories of a woman gone 7 years.
She was just a ray of sunshine. She had has these beautiful blue eyes. They just sparkle. You could see into her soul.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love you.
I love you too.
The DA issued a statement saying, despite his creative efforts to evade justice, today Robert Feldman was found guilty of murdering his wife, Stacy Feldman. I am extremely proud of the outstanding work by our prosecutors, investigators, victim advocates, support staff, and the Denver police detectives who never gave up on securing justice for Stacy. Moreover, I thank the jury for performing their civic duty over these last 3 weeks. Stacy's best friend described the trial experience and said that the jurors were crying and reaching their hands out to them, and that everybody was just extremely emotional. One of the jurors even said, "If I knew Stacy, I could see I would be best friends with her. She resonated with me." And her friend says they were all so invested and that it was an unbelievable experience. I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. Do you think that Bob killed Stacy because he was caught with infidelity once again, and maybe he knew this was going to be the last time she would put up with it and it was the last straw? Or do you think this was premeditated and there was more to this? Do you think that he wanted to be with Susan and so he had to get Stacy out of the way? What do you think the reason is behind this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for tuning in with me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the case coverage. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, don't forget to please rate this episode. And again, if you want to watch the video version, which includes all of the snippets, the interviews, and the photos, head over to YouTube and you can watch the video version of this case. And for all of you here with me on YouTube, thanks so much for joining me again today. Please don't forget to hit that like button on your way out and leave your comments below. I really want to know what you guys think the motive was here and why he did this. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in with me. I will talk to you very, very soon. And until the next case, stay safe. Bye.